The great pandemic bubble is popping and you need to pay attention. Here's exactly how we got to this situation. Back in early of 2020, the pandemic struck. The government ordered people to go sit in their homes and asset prices were in a free fall. That meant that central banks and politicians were going to step in. And boy, did they step in with undisciplined monetary and fiscal policy that led to one of the greatest and fastest recoveries in economic history. As we pushed into 2021, we then had a bigger and bigger asset bubble, which eventually peaked in November of last year. At that point, the historic inflation that we were experiencing had to be gotten under control. And so that's when the Fed started to talk tough and begin to create tighter financial conditions. As we have watched over the last 12 months, we have seen stocks, real estate, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and every other asset fall in line. Now, all of a sudden, we are starting to see more and more tech layoffs. But as we saw in the first half of the year, many companies, they did those layoffs. We saw all sorts of margin calls and contagion in the crypto industry, and people thought, how much worse could it get? Well, now we are seeing the second wave, the big popping of that pandemic bubble. We've seen companies like Lyft lay off 13% of their staff, Stripe 14%, Twitter 50%, and then today we got the big news that Facebook is going to lay off 11,000 employees. 11,000 people is a ton. It's only 13% of the company, but I don't think I've ever heard of 11,000 people getting laid off from one company all at the same time. If we then ask ourselves, why exactly are we in this situation? We can look to the entrepreneurs and the founders for details. We've seen Jack Dorsey say, hey, the company grew too quickly. We hired too many people. I'm sorry. We've also seen the founders of Stripe say that they didn't know how quickly things would recover. And then also they didn't know how quickly things would fall back in line once the Fed started to create tighter financial conditions. And then of course, the story isn't just about the difficulty in planning for entrepreneurs or the layoffs that we're seeing. We also saw yesterday FTX agree to be acquired by Binance. Rightfully so, there's a lot of people with questions and concerns. The truth is, we don't know what's happened yet. And so once that information comes out, we'll then get a better understanding. What went wrong? Who knew what? When? And exactly what does this mean for certain parts of the industry moving forward? But ultimately, loose monetary policy and undisciplined fiscal policy drove us into this situation. As we got higher and higher inflation, investors, both retail and institutions, will push out further on the risk curve in order to try to derive returns that outpace inflation. This is a story as old as time. In hindsight, the intervention in markets by central bankers and politicians distorted the free market capabilities, and it led to all sorts of things being broken. This is a bad situation. And so many people have been asking me, what exactly am I doing? I'm only able to do three things at the moment. I'm building, I'm waiting, and I'm learning. I'm trying to build companies, I'm trying to build a strong balance sheet, and I'm trying to build new skills and knowledge that can be used when we get to the other side of this. In terms of waiting, I simply don't want to make mistakes. There's a lot of people that make unforced errors in times of chaos and uncertainty. If you can mitigate those mistakes, then you'll have a better chance of succeeding on the other side. And lastly, I'm learning. There's all sorts of different events that are transpiring and many different economic developments that are playing out across the globe. I'm paying attention. I'm trying to understand what's happening because my guess is this won't be the last market downturn that I'll experience in my career, and it's unlikely to be the last market downturn you experience in your career. And so the more that I can learn today, the better prepared I'll be next time. Building, waiting, and learning. Those are three things that every single person can spend their time doing right now. This sucks. There's people being laid off. There's people losing lots of money, and times are tough. Remember, do everything you possibly can to be happy. Spend your time with friends and family. Try to do the things that you enjoy doing. Yes, this too shall pass. It doesn't seem that way right now, but ultimately, that's what I keep telling myself. I think it's what you should keep telling yourself.